Welcome in to another late night edition of Betting the Pits with your host, the real underscore G Warner, on Instagram, Patreon, Twitter, and on YouTube. Tonight, we're going to go through the Europa League semifinals plus Europa Conference League semifinals, both happening on Thursday, May 2nd afternoon here in the United States. And I will at least be focused on entertaining you all so I can stop thinking about the incredible, horrible uh, organization known as Major League Baseball. The beats have been horrible the last 2 days. The officiating even worse. Umpire replay reviews constantly getting calls wrong and not knowing their own rules. Incredible, but I've already gone more seconds on it than I thought I would in a soccer podcast. So today we're going to go through and try to keep the momentum going. Had a good Champions League semifinal first leg start. Same thing here, first legs in the Europa League, the Europa Conference League, and then we prepare for second legs next week. I will go through, I'll make an ultimate best bet end of show, which I will cut into an Instagram reel and a YouTube short. So if you're not following me on those platforms, at the real underscore G Warner is my handle there. If you're not a member of BetOnline, SportsBetting.ag, that's where I'm taking the lines from. There are promo codes in the podcast description on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. So go jump in there, go get some free money for some casinos, and let's get into this. Let's make some money. So we'll start where the money is, as always, or at least there's more money here in the Europa League than in the Europa Conference League. And I'll start with Roma hosting Bayer Leverkusen. So we got a Serie A against German Bundesliga matchup here. I can probably give you an idea of where lines have moved so far and where, of course, I'll tell you where I expect them to move tomorrow on match day. Roma currently a quarter goal underdog. All the juice on Bayer Leverkusen on the road. Over under is 2.5, juiced all the way to under. Where has this gone? So initially, Roma were a half a goal underdog with all the juice. So that's clearly Roma has taken some money, though not a huge change from a half a goal underdog at home to a quarter goal getting odds versus very juiced. But that does say something, at least that probably encourages some Leverkusen money, which is interesting after they had a really tough match this weekend with in the Topspiel in Deutschland, or in the German Bundesliga, the big Saturday night match with VfB Stuttgart. And now they go on the road to the Stadio Olimpico, which I went to earlier this year in October. And it's one of the most hallowed grounds across European soccer, one of the toughest places to play, the home of Roma, Associazione Sportiva Roma, and Lazio, making that up, AS Roma, though. And Leverkusen have, I mean, entered this weekend undefeated, already wrapped up the Meisterschale, won the German Bundesliga. And this is besides the DFB Pokal, which is the cup competition in Germany, the national cup competition, which they should be a gigantic favorite against a lower division side. This is, I guess, the last trophy, or two trophies left. This is the bigger of the two. The German Bundesliga doesn't matter. They've already clinched. Maybe they want to set some points records, but this is the competition they're looking for. Didn't start Florian Wirtz this weekend. Granit Xhaka was suspended. So Bayer Leverkusen enter in a pretty well rested. I mean, we'll see what lineups look like, of course. And please don't hate me, but I can't really project who's going to start. But I would expect a full Leverkusen side here. And Roma are in a much different predicament. So they are in a Champions League position in Serie A right now, but are fighting off another team in this competition, Atalanta, plus others like Fiorentina, who are probably a little bit too far outside, but ultimately want to compete. But Roma can get a golden ticket to Champions League by winning this competition. Made it to the Europa League final last year, I believe, but did not win. And so this is their one of their avenues, though it does look like, based on the coefficient change and how much success Italy had in the continental competitions this year as Champions League's expanding, it looks like they will probably get a spot, or at least a fifth spot, to the new Champions League format. But we'll see. And it's not guaranteed. So I think this is going to be a competition that Roma go for pretty significantly. They rotated this weekend, but ultimately still were able to get a result, and it's very good for your boy. As I've been betting Roma significantly, you can see over my right shoulder, I do have a Roma scarf, which I'm not a scarf guy, but I thought it was left behind by a friend of mine. Turns out he just didn't want it because he's a Juventus fan. What's up, Francis? You're probably not listening, but thank you if you are. And so I've been back in Roma a significant amount, really ever since the manager change from Jose Mourinho to Daniele De Rossi, who has been awesome. They've been scoring a lot of goals under Roma. At least that's how it started. It's not how it's continued. So there's been a lot less goals scored. And that does, I think, speak to this total here. So Leverkusen in Germany, where there's a lot of goals scored, more there than maybe any of the top 5 European soccer leagues that I cover on this Betting the Pitch podcast network. Stay tuned for a Friday episode going through all of the leagues across and probably mainly focus on relegation, as that seems to be where I've been spending most of my time lately, and stacking up as many wins as possible. The top of the table stuff is not really my jam, but I have had a ton of success in the continental regions. And for some reason, a lot of you really like to tune in to my Europa League episodes. Not as many right now, Wednesday, May 1st, late night here in Dallas, Texas, but soon to be May 2nd. But for some reason, somehow, some way, there's a lot of European and Europa League interest, and I would love to explain it. If someone wants to leave that in the 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, that'd be awesome. Or in the comments on YouTube, I would love to hear it because I don't know why, but I appreciate it. Regardless, get back to this. Let's find some winners. So Roma, quarter goal underdog at home. They pretty much, my take on any of these two-legged ties is you really need to have a strong position if you're going on the road the second leg. And as we saw in the Champions League, Dortmund were able to get a victory on Wednesday, the 1st, today. As I record this late night on Wednesday, May 1st. Certainly it's May 2nd in Europe right now, but regardless, that was big. And then Bayern Munchen were not able to hold on to a lead after initially falling behind. Pretty much anyone that, and I will talk about two advanced numbers here, the second leg at home is a really big deal. And it's a sad thing for Roma here. They took advantage of that in the last leg. I think got a win at Milan on the road anyway, 1-0, and then held on at home, covered the spread and went under. Were just really great to me. And maybe it's certainly, if there's any team in this competition that I'm partial to, it might be Roma because they've been very good to my wallet. Leverkusen on the other side, they are going to, I mean, they played a lot of counterattacking football. They didn't play their best players this weekend at Stuttgart, or at home against Stuttgart, which is even more surprising. But clearly they're preparing for this Europa League competition. It's the biggest of the trophies that they can still secure. So I would expect Leverkusen to probably have tried, or at least, I mean, you don't want to give film away of how you're going to play, but I would expect Leverkusen to be playing in a manner that they would then take to the Stadio Olimpico in the Roman capital, to then, rather than just completely going a different direction, though who knows with Xabi Alonso, and he's clearly one of the best managers already in Europe after his incredible performance this season, taking Bayer Leverkusen to the top of Germany. With that said, I think Roma are going to play defensively as well. And my favorite thing is to play home underdogs and unders when there's a battle for possession. I don't think it's a clear designation of who will be the favorite to control more of the ball. If that's a bet, you probably take the underdog here, just because, or if there was a bet to, there might be. I mean, I'm not familiar with all the props across many European soccer focused locales, but ultimately, I think that Roma, they've started off scoring a ton of goals under Daniele De Rossi, but it really hasn't continued. So, do I think that'll happen against Bayer Leverkusen? I'm not sure, but I do think it's a pretty good position for Roma being a quarter goal underdog at home, because they will have a big crowd behind them. It's not the most intimate of settings. Unfortunately, there's a track around the pitch, which is probably why they're trying to rebuild all the Italian stadiums that are shared by the big clubs, like this one, Stadio Olimpico in Roma, also the San Siro in Milan, which I went to right before. I'm not necessarily sure where this is all gonna go, but in this competition, I think these teams are very, very similar, despite what Leverkusen has done in a very weakened German Bundesliga, where Dortmund have played terribly. Bayern Munich have had huge problems, though they were certainly on display last season. Leipzig have not been as strong either. So I think that there's a good potential that Leverkusen, also playing a lot of bad teams in this competition, they haven't really been as tested as Roma have. I mean, Italy has done great in continental competitions this season, and they ultimately, I mean, it's been a great league, I think. Inter far beyond everyone. It's crazy they're not in the Champions League, but that's what happens when you go to penalty kicks. I just think Roma are really strong. I've had a lot of success with them, so I might be a little bit glowing towards Roma as opposed to the rest of the teams out there. But Leverkusen are one of those teams that have been scoring a ton of late goals to get results, get wins, save themselves, and keep this undefeated streak alive. And I just don't know necessarily that there's a good chance it happens. Pretty much, we saw Real Madrid running out the clock late in their match at Bayern Munich this week because they knew they had a second leg at home. So I don't think there's a huge drive there either for the road team, especially in this case, a road favorite to cover the spread. I think ultimately Roma side I want here. It's a little bit scary to play under 2.5, especially a very juiced one might hit 2.25 before kickoff. I would expect, per usual, that favorites and over money will come in, but can't say that for sure, and certainly depends on lineups and things like that. I think Roma had a reputation for scoring a lot of goals early in Daniel De Rossi's tenure, but that slowed, and Romelu Lukaku has not been playing. Was not even in the team this weekend. Concerned about his health, but what his absence would essentially do is make this number climb, I would suspect, and make it harder for make it hard for Roma to score, certainly. But Paulo Dybala, I think, is the most important player. We'll see about his status. Never know when he's picking up an injury, unfortunately. But I think at this point, I'm most interested in seeing if Leverkusen can do this on the road. I don't really believe that they can. So my biggest interest in this first leg is Roma, a quarter goal underdog at home. But I also like under 2.5. Probably would like the side better than the total here. As for two advanced number, we have AS Roma, a plus 260 underdog, $100 bet will win you 260. Leverkusen on the other side minus 320, so $320 will win you 100. That gives a very low percentage, 28% chance for Roma to advance here, and I'm pretty interested in that as well. I think they get it very possible they get a good result at home. The problem is, do they get a big enough one to make that stand up? And they have to go on the road to what will be a very tough environment in Germany. And if they're, I mean, the big question, if you got a 28% chance and you get the penalty kicks to try to move on, even on the road, that would certainly be a worthwhile bet because pretty much, I mean, it's not a coin flip in that scenario, probably, but it's close. So you'd be certainly plus EV, plus expected value, positive expected value in that type of scenario. But a lot of that hinges on how Roma do in this first leg. More I talk about, the more interested I am, though. So put me down as a possibility for Roma plus 260 to advance here if you want something to root for over a couple legs. Next matchup in Europa League, we'll still get to the Europa Conference League, and of course, it'll be part of the ultimate best bet. So stick around for all of that. Thank you for all of you. Keep getting more people coming in. I appreciate that. Just everyone that loves Europa League and Europa Conference League for some reason that I can't explain. We got Olympique de Marseille. They are hosting Atalanta, another Italian club, as I mentioned, Serie A, representing Marseille from Ligue 1 in France. Currently, Marseille a pick'em with almost all the juice at home in the Stade Orange Velodrome. And the over under here is 2.5, to slightly more to over than to under. Where has this line moved so far? So initially, Olympique de Marseille were a quarter goal favorite at home with all the juice on Atalanta. That number is kind of gone. I mean, if there's still Atalanta getting odds at Pick'em, then maybe that would be a scenario where we might see that quarter come back. But I feel like it probably closes Pick'em, though we'll see. Certainly be looking out for Atalanta as an underdog. Over under your 2.5. It looks like initially when I had it, it was well, okay. So I had it at let's refresh to make sure I got the most current. Yeah, I do. Okay. Well, seems like we've been going back and forth with this total. So looks like we had minus 108 initially, fell down to 102, and we've come back to minus 108. So looked like people were betting over, and then people have started betting back the under. Marseille are a tough team for me to call. I'm not sure that I've had great success predicting them in Ligue 1 this season. Feels like they are not a very good team, but somehow are in the semifinals. I think they got through a pretty tough scenario in their last round with Benfica, though Benfica should have been out of any European competition since really the Champions League and how bad they started that campaign. But they made it and were a team that I made money against for a lot of the continental run. So I guess I shouldn't complain. But Marseille, to me, they're just a team that falls behind routinely to bad teams in Liga, but then they use their talent. Patrick Aubameyang is incredible at scoring goals, and eventually they basically bludgeon you to death and get their third goal to your one, and looks like a big win. But I think there's reason for the Marseille fans to be as disappointed as they are in the team's performance because they expect Ligue 1 champions, probably Champions League championships as well, trophies everywhere, and they are nowhere really near it. But they've made it to the semifinals of the Europa League, and this would be a good chance for them to get into Europe because or to get into the Champions League because I don't think they've finished, or I don't think they're in a position in Ligue 1 to do so. As we currently, or as I record on this Wednesday, May 1st, soon to be May 2nd. Atalanta, on the other side, like I said earlier, fighting with Roma for a Champions League spot. Here's a great way to get an automatic bid as well. All these teams are certainly motivated by trophies, but also the money involved in getting an automatic spot into Champions League and not having to worry about their league finish. I don't know how that necessarily impacts this matchup because I think motivation is fairly equal, though Atalanta are going to be fighting a big crowd at the Stade Orange Velodrome. It can turn fairly quickly. That's one thing about American sport. It's very different, I think, than Europe or European sport or just international or just soccer fans in general. Is there's a lot of negativity in the soccer world, in the stands, in the crowds. And when things aren't going well, you hear the whistles. You hear whistles. That's also different than boos that you hear in American sport. But in American sport, they're pretty much always supportive, unless you're talking about New York, Boston at times, and baseball. But for the most part, everyone is supporting the home team unless things are going really badly. But even then, I think it's usually always a plus. In European soccer specifically, you don't always see that. You see a lot of disappointment. Marseille are one of those sides that they really need to keep them keep the fan supporters or whatever we call them. You need to keep them on their side, and that's a question, especially because Atalanta, formerly an offensive only type of squad, are now pretty balanced. They've got really great players. Teun, Teun Koopmeiners. Good luck with me pronouncing Dutch names, LOL. But has been awesome. Probably the best player for Atalanta this season. Not sure if he's going to Juventus or to Inter Milan. There have been rumors all over the place that he will not, most likely will not be in Bergamo next season. But ultimately, Atalanta have a great amount of attackers. They've filled in defensive weaknesses. Still not a great defense, I don't think, but certainly good enough to make the semifinals of this competition. And if they had a little bit bigger budget offensively, I think they would be fighting for a Scudetto in Italia. And we're up there just a couple seasons ago. And then unfortunately, budget stuff came in and they started selling players and had to rebuild. But they've done very well. They're great at that. And they're really talented. So we'll see at the pick'em right now on the road in a tough environment. I don't think that's enough for me to consider. Slash, it's not at the moment. I'll be waiting to see and lurking, as you would expect, to see if we get a quarter of a goal on Atalanta, but don't have that yet. So we'll see. I'll have to wait. In terms of the total here, I guess I'm more interested in under 2.5. I do think first leg is going to play very tight. I was not correct in the quarterfinals of Champions League, but that went 6-2 over, 75% overs. I don't know that that's something you would expect most places. And I'm not really sure that would repeat itself again. I do think this is going to be, so if I'm going to pick something on this game, I think the biggest interest I have right now, since I don't have a quarter of a goal on Atalanta just yet, I'll go Atalanta under 2.5 goals. To advance number, we have Atalanta minus 200 odds, so 1 to 2. So that gives them a 33% chance on Marseille to advance if you're using that number, but I guess based on the little bit of difference between that and the handle and such. So we're giving Marseille 37% chance, excuse me, to get through. And that's, you know, interesting for a first leg, because if they have a huge output in their first and take a big lead, then they can go to Atalanta and sit on it. The problem is it didn't work very well for Fiorentina in the Coppa Italia. I think that was midweek last week. Atalanta with a second leg, I think, are a huge advantage. Pretty much all these teams that have second legs at home have been favored in Champions League and now in Europa League here too. And it's a big deal. I don't think that I'm in a position to want to take a position on Marseille. I just don't really want them. I think my dream scenario, if I don't get a quarter of a goal in Atalanta, is to hope that Marseille take a lead and then I can find some way to get Atalanta maybe with a 1 goal aggregate deficit to win at home. Because unfortunately, if it's tied and they go back, Atalanta are probably a bigger favorite than 1-2 odds. I don't really know where to go with this one or what to do at this point. I think I like the under a little bit, but I think I wait for Atalanta to hopefully, or for Olympique de Marseille to catch some money on the home team day of, and then I can bet Atalanta a quarter goal underdog on the road. Though there is some concern that they're not going to fight super hard to equalize. Instead, they'd rather take less chances and be behind 1-0 behind by 1 goal going home, where they have a good chance to at least equalize and then potentially overturn that deficit. But for my ultimate best bet, that will come end of show, the Europa League portion, I'm going to go with Roma quarter goal underdog on the road. Or excuse me, at home to Bayer Leverkusen. That's my favorite bet as we record live at 11:41 Central Standard Time or Daylight Time or whatever Central Time on Wednesday, May 1st. So I'll move now to the Europa Conference League. Before I get there, if you're not a member of my Patreon, check it out, patreon.com/real_G Warner. Best spot to get all my plays, leans, write-ups, everything you might see in other sites, you can get there all in one place. I do leans every night. Two lines, sorry. I do leans every night, and then I basically file them down the next day, usually unless I'm playing something overnight. So if you're looking for overnight play to try to grab line value, that certainly is a great way to use me for. I've had a lot of success in my gambling career, sports betting career, of picking where lines will go and trying to lock things in at the correct times. So I think I can help you there if you're looking for that. If you just want more action, certainly have that, especially on soccer weekends. We might have 30 plays. And then, of course, trying to figure out which Major League Baseball team will be a 99.4% likelihood to win, and then seeing how they collapse. Just kidding, trying to avoid those. But after watching the Mets tonight, just get completely screwed by the refs, the umpires not even knowing their own rules. That was a really tough one to take, especially after 86% win expectancies dropping the night before. But that's welcome to baseball, I guess. Hopefully they happen to other people, because they always seem to happen to me. Moving to the Conference League, we'll start with Fiorentina hosting Bruges. Fiorentina, who are kind of a Conference League type of squad. They seem to finish in that type of spot. I think their manager, Italiano, awesome name for Italian team, is going to be leaving for some other job. I don't know if that's confirmed where he's headed yet. But Fiorentina, it's basically their ceiling. They don't do much more than Conference League. But if they win this competition, they could find an automatic bid to the Europa League. That's a big deal. And your odds are back. Bet the Yawns minus 500. Very expensive. You still won. You cashed, because late night, that's what's happening. Though, thank you for the more people that are coming in. I appreciate it. Wish you could ask me some questions, but you probably have to be on StreamYard. And I doubt anyone's going to find their way in. If there's a way and you want to get in there, send me some questions. Or maybe the best way, leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or subscribe on YouTube and comment there, and I will read whatever I see as soon as I see it. Regardless, Fiorentina. So where is this number moved? Fiorentina currently a half a goal favorite with all the juice right now at home to Club Bruges. Over under is 2.5, juiced all the way to under. Now, this number has certainly been taking some Fiorentina money. I've only seen a half a goal underdog Bruges, but the odds have been climbing. Looks like this one's going to head towards 3/4 of a goal before kickoff. Bruges had an awesome run in Champions League last season. They are a Belgian side, and probably this is a competition that fits them far better than the knockout stages of the Champions League. But they did it. They added to the team. Just a very talented squad, though I think they parted ways with their manager mid-season. So we'll see how that all goes or finishes, I guess. But I think the big question here is Fiorentina. So this is one of those scenarios where they don't play the second leg at home. So there's maybe some value potentially in Bruges. I'll get the two advanced numbers later, very soon, actually, soon. But Bruges, what I'm trying to figure out about Bruges is, so they knocked out Osasuna, who had done a big deal trying to get ready to play in Europe this season, and that kind of sent them in a tailspin and kind of killed their La Liga campaign, and their manager opted not to stick around. But Bruges has been a kind of a rockier road. I think they've been a more offensive team, but they're going to have to play defensively against an Italian's club on the road. That's, I think, going to be clear. I'm not necessarily sure that they're going to be able to make that happen. It does make me worried if you're playing it under 2.5, though. The Fiorentina style is to possess the ball and try to defend or really protect their defense, which has some problems in it. They don't have the biggest budget in Italy, et cetera, et cetera. I think we see what happens with the Fiorentina defense, but ultimately they scored a ton of goals this weekend against Sassuolo, who are looking like they are going to be one of those teams that did not expect to be in a relegation fight and are going to get relegated. So I'm not sure that there's a lot to take from that other than Fiorentina potentially being overvalued after a dominant victory. I think that makes Bruges even more attractive to me than they were initially. I like them in the first place. I'll be waiting. Literally, if you don't want to, you want to wait for the smaller clubs because they're not getting bet no matter what. I don't think they're getting bet. I think it's the big clubs, biggest fan bases, biggest known teams with the big names. Those who get bet up to kick off, especially in European competitions. And I think that's why I've succeeded so much, because just having some little knowledge about the smaller clubs, I think, is the best way to make some money in this sport, life, world, whatever. I think I'm probably more interested in Bruges getting a half of a goal than I am in the under 2.5. Fiorentina are going to make it hard for Bruges to have a lot of chances. I think Bruges are going to have to live on a counterattack. It's hard to expect goals in that way. I would love to get a full goal of insurance, but that doesn't seem likely. Certainly there would be a piece of that on a 3/4 of a goal, but we don't even have that yet. So all I can tell you is the under 2.5 is probably another way to back Bruges, because you're pretty much backing the Bruges defense if you are backing them in this first leg plus 1/2 of a goal. In terms of the two advanced number, we have Fiorentina minus 180 favorite. So smaller, but it's rare to see a first leg home team favored. Looks like we are 40% chance for Bruges to advance based on that number. So we'll see how that all looks, but I think Bruges are a little bit more of a live dog than expected. Fiorentina crashed out of the Coppa Italia semifinal. That certainly hurt. But I'm not really sure. I mean, this is probably Fiorentina need to go for this like they'd be going for a place in Serie A that they have been. Tough doing double duty at this point. Most of the teams are kind of figuring out or picking what competition to use their best in, whether that's a cup competition across continental Europe or it's in their domestic league. I think Fiorentina are stuck in between, and that's also a benefit to Bruges. Next matchup, we'll go Aston Villa hosting Olympiacos from Piraeus in Athens. Aston Villa in Birmingham, England, the only English club to, I guess, get anywhere through to the semifinals. Hilarious. Nice job, England. I love seeing England lose. And I do like Villa, though, and Unai Emery. So that's a little bit of a tough scenario. Olympiacos have been very unimpressive to me ever since I've watched them in Continental play the last 2 seasons. The club I follow closest, Sports Club Freiburg from Deutschland and Germany. They were in the same group, I think, the last 2 seasons in Europa League, and Olympiacos were completely unimpressive to me. Now they go to Villa. And there is some possibility that Villa will underestimate Olympiacos, a Greek club that has some money, has bought kind of over the hill type of names that you'd know if you follow European soccer, but not the most impressive lineup of players, especially at this age in their lives. But ultimately, some big names that have played in big places. Aston Villa, a 1.25 goal favorite at home. Juice is split both ways. Over under is 2.75. Juice all the way to over. So there's some interest, I think, in potentially Aston Villa not playing as, I mean, they play an aggressive high line. They play much better defense at home. They don't have as big or talented of an attack to face here. So I think that really helps Aston Villa and should make them a very big favorite to advance. I think Olympiacos is gonna have to go and defend, because I don't think they can outscore Aston Villa, and they have to really worry about Ollie Watkins, who can find some sort of daylight and score. It seems to be what he does without a lot of chances. Scariest striker out there, I think, is one that can do that type of thing. From a I guess an Olympiacos perspective, like I said, they're going to play defensively on the road. They're looking for an under here to give themselves a chance the second leg. I don't know necessarily that I want to back Olympiacos getting more than a goal. Certainly puts them, because I think a different scenario here is in a domestic league game. You get nothing for losing 1-0 versus 3-0. Yes, it's better for goal difference, but it doesn't seem that most club managers care about that domestically. In this competition with two legs, it does matter. So I think there's a better chance in Olympiacos still playing a defensive brand of football, trailing 1-0 on the road, which does put them, I think, in a better position to also support under 2 3/4, which might even hit 3. And that's certainly a number I'm looking for. Not necessarily that I love the defense of this matchup, but I do think that the road team, the smaller minnow, will do its best to try to still play defense, even if behind, instead of going gung ho to try to equalize and seal a point or get a result on the road, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm interested there. When I look at the two advanced number, we have Aston Villa minus 320 to get through, compared to Olympiacos plus 260. It's a pretty ginormous price. We're given, again, Olympiacos 28% to get through. And there's some interest there, I think, to potentially have a second leg at home, but I think Aston Villa are much stronger. Budget is clearly bigger. So that's all, I think, a concern in that direction. As for my biggest interest, I think in betting in this matchup, I think it is that the total at 2 3/4. I don't think Olympiacos are as likely to score. So I think that if you're playing Olympiacos and playing them to keep this tight, I think you then look at the total as opposed to the side. So you'd like, so I like Olympiacos under 2 3/4. Would certainly love to have under 3 before kickoff on Thursday afternoon here in Dallas, Texas. We've now come to the ultimate best bet. I will make a 1 minute or shorter video because that's my, I think, limited amount on the various streaming platforms that I do, but hopefully that attracts some users rather than the people that do the 31 minutes and 31 seconds right now, live late night. Of course, this podcast will be available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube in the full length version if you want to get all 30 minutes and hopefully laugh at a few of my jokes. Make sure you follow that up in the comments or leave a 5-star review. Tell me exactly how funny I am or maybe how not funny I am. And I vowed to read whatever's out there as long as it's not going to get me banned from Apple Podcasts or the various streaming platforms. Though at Big East Bend in the college basketball season certainly said some things that could get us kicked off. If you're the cops, don't listen to it, or the Apple police, whatever. Stay away. Everything is above board. I probably should delete some episodes, but anyway, here we are. If you're not a member of my Patreon, I already mentioned at patreon.com/real_G Warner. If you're not subscribed or following all these platforms, make sure you get on there because you want to make sure you don't miss these. But the best place to follow me is at @the_Real_G Warner on Twitter, and I'll be there doing everything, probably yelling at umpires for the rest of my lifetime. As long as I have hair on this head, I will probably be complaining about umpires, officials, and things that I hate because it's amazing to me how bad, with instant replay, how bad they still are at their jobs. With that said, it's time for the ultimate best bet. Can't think of anything else to plug. I guess besides my soccer podcast and the top 5 European soccer leagues will be coming out on Friday, I suspect. I'm not going to the NFL draft this week, so I don't have to do it early before I run to the airport. But looking forward to that, and hopefully you will all join me then. But I know a lot of you will be with me, even if you're not live in the Europa League broadcast, because people love the Europa League, and I can't explain it, but I'm happy about it. So it's time for the ultimate best bet. Let's do it. This is the real_G Warner on Instagram, Patreon, Twitter, and on YouTube. This is the ultimate best bet for the Europa League and Europa Conference League semifinals first leg. It's taking place all on Thursday, May 2nd. And I got to find some best bets for you. I picked one from the Europa League, one from the Europa Conference League, and then I blasted out on the social media platforms at the real_G Warner on YouTube and on Instagram, all in 1 minute version, shorter than 34 minutes that we're going on right now. But there is a live version and a longer version if you want to hear all my thoughts. From the Europa League, I like Roma under getting an underdog at home, a quarter of a goal. And in the Europa Conference League, I like Olympiacos under 2 3/4, but I'll be waiting for 3. If you're not a member of my Patreon, check it out. Patreon.com/thereal_G Warner. Best spot to get all my plays, leans, write-ups, everything across all sports. But for my ultimate best bet on this show, I'm going Roma, quarter goal underdog at home to Bayer Leverkusen. I think they have a good chance to upset them. And this is the first way to do it. And that'll do it for this episode. Thanks for tuning in. I will talk to you all very soon. I guess it will be Thursday night with pregame.com and Munaf Manji going with a baseball episode, trying to get more winners as we've been crushing it there. And then we'll be doing a soccer podcast for the weekend. Talk to you all very soon. There is an NFL podcast coming out with Andrew Schnicker, A_SCHNITKER, my NFL co-host. We'll be going through, I think, early looks at futures and NFL win totals, especially after attending the NFL draft. Plus, we still have a college basketball something coming out, maybe when the portal gets a little bit more stabilized, as at Big East Ben said, though I'm not sure that it ever will. Thank you all for tuning in, and I'll talk to you all tomorrow night.